Hello, and welcome to the Emotional Entrepreneur Show with Summer and
Jen.
Welcome to our show as well as 2025. We're so excited to be here with you today and talk about this very subject because it's a great way of starting out the new year. I love the subject, and I know my partner over here absolutely loves the subject. So we're going to be talking about money mastery and breaking the code. All right. Because Jen is all about the subject, I'm going to turn this over to her because she can talk about it until the sun comes up. And here's the thing. She's going to also talk about her incredible book that I would love for you to check out. And it really covers a lot of what we're going to be going over today. Jen?
Oh, wow. This is so weird. I'm not used to being like the main.
That's you, girl. You are the main deal. You're always the main deal. No.
I love it. I mean, it's all going to work out great. So, oh my gosh, yes, this topic is I love it. I mean, it's everything I do, especially now. And Summer and I have talked about this in the past in our other episodes, but I think it's the perfect time for this because it is the beginning of the year, and some of you do New Year's resolutions, or maybe you just set goals. We personally just do it whatever in the year it is. We don't necessarily wait till January, but anyways, we're going to be talking about money mindset, finance, and strategic wealth building, how money has emotional attachments to it. And there was one more bullet point. Oh yeah, crafting a financial freedom plan. So there's a lot. We'll see if we get through everything. But I just think it's great to talk about these things because often when we talk about money mindset, it's a lot different than what I used to do. So if you didn't know, I used to be a financial advisor, but I'm still in the financial space. I've been in it for 19 years.
Woo!
19 years.
You an expert.
Oh my gosh, 19 years. It is so crazy to think about how I used to do appointments, Summer. I used to have to drive to people's houses like a doctor on call that made house visits.
Yeah, you were like Miss Boutique Finance.
Oh God, my had changed. But there was some seedy neighborhoods I had to go into.
Ooh,
oh my gosh,
really? Well, that sounds like social work.
Yes, sometimes there were times when it felt like social work.
And I'm telling you, I've been in a lot of neighborhoods because I would have to do the same thing, drive to my client's house, right?
Yeah.
Oh my
God. I'll tell you a real quick funny story.
We're doing the best we can. So, yeah.
I'll tell you a funny story. So I remember, so what happened was if there's a high turnaround in the financial field, you realize you don't want to do it. And so if you're there and then, okay, so let's say there's an advisor that left. So if they don't transfer their book of business to another advisor, it becomes what they call a house account, right?
Okay.
So of course the clients are still there. They're still in their policies or their accounts or whatnot. And then the advisor is no longer attached to it because they left or they're no longer licensed. So sometimes they'll get a phone call from the client. And then there's somebody that needs to, provide the service or do a transaction. So they'll assign a new person. So I remember, I used to go into the office all the time. This is like circa 2006.
Oh my God.
Circa 2006. And I remember when they assigned it to me, I remember our in-house manager, she was like, okay, do you want to take this? And I'm like, and of course, I was starting. I had nothing. I'll take anything, right? She gave me the warning. She's like, it's kind of in a bad area. And I was like, well, how bad? And she's like, just make sure you go during the day. So, I mean, I took it. But it's just funny. I just think back to these stories and these times where I'm just like, okay, God, hedge of protection over me. Keep me And, it always worked out. It was, it's just so interesting, you get to know the people, but man, I mean, when you talk about people's finances, is a very, personal thing, and you hear people's stories. I mean, you learn everything, because when you're doing, especially insurance, when I was an insurance agent for 18 years,
Really?
you find out everything. You find out all diseases, you find
Yeah.
out all sicknesses, you find out about
Oh,
DUIs, incarcerate. You find out everything, because that background affects so many things. So it's very, very interesting. So kind of like a doctor, or even somebody in the
yeah.
medical field,
We're doing
you
a holistic.
it's not that you don't care, but you do get desensitized, because you're just like, I'm doing my job. I'm not here to judge you. I'm not here to like go, oh my gosh, but it's just more of like, no, I'm trying to do the best and see what we can do with what, like you said,
We're
we
doing
do
the
our
best
best
with
with
what
what
we
we
have,
know.
man. I mean, it's a tough
Right.
life
And there
sometimes,
were
right? So,
but
oh
my
my
gosh,
God.
let me tell you, there were times when I'm like, "Oh, man, this is not gonna go through. This is not gonna get approved. This is underwriting is gonna be like,
Oh
hell no."
man,
So,
and
it
that's
was
tough.
it
Let
was
me just jump
crazy.
in here and I want to say one thing. As you're talking about how you're learning about people and their circumstances, the diseases, the finances, the incarcerations, the DUI, like all of this stuff, that's human, that's life, right? And we all have something, right? Whether it's
Oh,
family,
yeah.
whether it's like we've done something or whatever it is, but it's money is runs deep. It runs deep. It runs deep into the mindset. It runs deep because our values. It runs deep because what we learn. And I know this because money touches us all in a different way. How we think about
Right.
money is so impactful, right? And as I was thinking about what you were saying, in the likenesses between like social work, being a clinician, being a doctor in the psychology field, it's like you draw from your clients the information, the data and they want to disclose. They want somebody to talk to because they feel so deeply about what's happening in their lives, because it's going to infuse and trickle down into everything that they do. So go ahead.
Right. No, you're
Yeah.
absolutely right, and I think that's a great segue into the first, thing that we wanna talk about, like, the money mindset. And like you said, there's this thing about having the beliefs that are surrounded by money, and that's pretty much what the money mindset is about. What beliefs did you grow up with? And, how did they shape your financial future or your current situation, right? So, for example, let's say we grew up in a household, where you had parents, or maybe you grew up with one parent, and the language that you heard all the time was like, well, we don't have the money for that, or we can't afford that, or that's too expensive, right? When you hear things like that, that's already creating a scarcity mindset. So we grow up with that, between, what was the stats, somewhere between like 1 and 7 or 1 and 8, that's where the mind as a child is being molded, right? And then those
Zero to
beliefs are,
five. Zero to
yeah,
five.
they're
Yeah.
that early on. So,
Yeah.
even you said 0, right?
Zero
So
to five.
think
Yeah.
about those people, like, even if you're a parent and you have a baby and you think the baby doesn't understand, that's already going into their subconscious. It's and we've talked about this before too, where it's creating those cranial grooves,
Yes.
and
Yeah.
you're already
Brain mapping.
establishing, yeah,
Yeah.
you're establishing those beliefs.
Mhm.
So if you are somebody that has said those words or thought those words, and they're still currently your belief system, it's possible that either came from your mom or dad, or whoever was raising you, and you heard that languaging. So that's part of the money mindset part. And it could be the opposite. Maybe you grew up in an abundance environment, so maybe you heard, you're like, oh, that's okay, we make good choices, or oh, we always find a way to pay for it. I mean, there's the opposite side of that. And so if you grew up in that environment, you're very, very fortunate. So, you have anything to add to that about growing up with certain stories when it comes to money?
Yes.
Oh, no,
And
you're laughing.
Yes, yes, I do. And I'm going to give an example of my own experiences, and maybe you can dissect this a little bit, Jen, because um, I grew up in a separated family. So, from I lived with my mom, then my mom turned us over to my grandparents who were very hard working. My paternal grandparents, I respect them. They are gone now, but what they did for us was incredible. And my grandfather had been in the military, out of the military, and then from there, my grandmother had like an eighth grade education, and they both work in
Mm,
canneries, and yet
no.
they still were able to buy a house in California, have no debt. I mean, just amazing things, right? And be able to take care of their grandkids as well for a few years, right? And then I went to my father, and um, from like I think it was like 5 to 10, right? And he had his own businesses, but he did poorly with money. He was an excessive gambler. He But there was no scarcity. Like, he continued to run his businesses, and there were times that he lost it all, right? But somehow he got back up on his feet. He was an entrepreneur. He got it done. But at the
Wow.
same time, he was a gambler. And so one of the things that I learned very early on is, if you go into a casino, do not, you got to be very careful, because that kind of stuff runs deep and it's exciting to me. Right. And so I was
Oh,
just like, oh my
wow.
God, I love to gamble. But I don't like to gamble to the point where I like to gamble responsibly. And I could get caught up in that gambling mindset, right? Like, oh my God, I need to keep putting down more. I'm losing, but I'm just going to win. I'm like, ugh, so I have to like have those boundaries for myself. I only take so much
Interesting.
money down, blah, blah, blah. After that, it used to be, I used to go to the ATM, get money, get money, get money. But it was like, nope. As I grew up, I was
Yeah.
like, okay, there's got to be some boundaries. The other side of the coin is, my other grandparents were like multimillionaires. And yet I grew up with a single mom from 10 to 18. And basically, she said, their money, my money is not your money. So what you will do is you'll go get a job. So she taught me very early on about worth ethics, values. I started working, at 15 and a half, but technically a job, right? A real job. And prior to
Mhm.
that, I worked at my father's stores and stuff. But, you know, so my work ethic around money, around what you earn, was very set in my brain. Like, you earn it for yourself. Nobody else is going to take care of you, that kind of stuff. So it wasn't
Wow.
scarcity, it was money values. So you
Mm.
just dissect that, because seriously, I don't think there was like the scarcity. It was like, okay, even though we don't have it, we're just going to spend it, right? And then my mom's like, you don't have it, you earn it. So
Wow. Yeah, there was a lot going on. Yeah, it definitely wasn't a
that's a lot.
scarcity thing. Yeah, it was just like this YOLO.
Yeah. And
Here's the day,
yo-yo.
gone today. It's all good.
Just like this.
Right. You know what, though, what's so interesting is I think that's why I see you're very, now I think because of that, growing up and seeing all that, that's why right now you're very calculated. You know, you're very wise when you're making the decisions because you've been in that environment where you saw the money just going out the door and out the door. Um, where I mean, we've been in a situation where you're like, "Jen, put the credit card down," because I am notorious for buying programs. It's like
Oh my
crazy.
God. Or, developing a program and putting the card down, right? So it's the same thing, but you learn, we both learned from our experiences. And that's the thing,
Right,
because I also had those money values, that also set the tone for, okay, if I don't have it, then you don't spend it, right?
right.
Or you figure out a way to get it in a legal way, but it's like, and you work for it.
The
And so
caveat.
I think that was the tone my mom set. So that was a good one too. But I knew that I would never be without, your necessities. But when it came to prom dresses, or it came to yearbooks, or the things that I want, she's like, well, if it's a special something, you need to go and earn it. And that
Mm.
taught me value behind what I gained, what I earned. So anyway,
Right, and
yeah,
I've seen the opposite. I've seen and you know what this is about, but I've seen where kids grew up in a very the parent is rich,
yeah,
and I seen the kids, adult kids, just, completely spoiled.
Yeah. No.
expecting like an international trip for
Yeah.
Christmas and
Yeah.
things like that, and I'm just like, like, what the heck? Like, I've seen the
Yeah.
opposite where it wasn't like it was necessarily earned. It was just a very entitled environment. And so I think there needs to be, a balance. But at the end of it, it is what you said. I think the word that you said was very key was the values. What is the value that's placed on the money? Because it's not good or bad, and I think that's something that we all need to remember, that money is not good or bad.
Mm.
It's an energy.
Mm.
It's also a tool. It's not, because and I've heard how many times I've heard this phrase like, oh yeah, the greedy, or no, the wealthier, the richer you get, the greedier you get. I hear that
Mm.
from
Mm.
people sometimes, and I'm like, I have to correct it. I'm like, no, it's actually going to just amplify what was already there.
Mm.
So if somebody was already, good natured and generous and kind and giving, let's say, so now they come across like, they amass wealth, however that may happen. They tend to be people that give more, or they're the people that donate, 100,000 to like, the like, I know somebody who would do this to the dog shelter,
Yeah.
right, or to a battered women's shelter. Right, they'll donate that money because that was already in their heart. Now, if you were already greedy to begin with, and then you come across, wealth, you're just gonna probably, spend it more or find other ways to just, amplify what was already there. So it isn't like money is the bad thing that makes you evil. It isn't that. It's going to amplify how you already were. So
Well,
fascinating. There's like so much psychology behind it.
let me ask you something. Okay,
Yeah.
so I had a parent who grew up with parents who did very well, right? And they basically exchanged love for money. So they would say,
Mm.
"Okay, I love you. Here's this. Here's this amount of money. Here's a car. Here's a place to live. Don't worry about that. I'll take care of you. But your value is that. It's that
Mm.
exchange, right?" And then you look at somebody like, maybe like I don't know. Like I've watched many documentaries on the Menendez brothers, right? And so you look at them, and they said, the story is, or the the what they were talking about is these brothers maybe have killed their parents for the money, right? And it's like, and they
Right.
grew up with money, and yet there was a lot going on in the background. We don't know it all, and who knows the real story behind it. But you get these kids too who get so accustomed to receiving that when they don't and it's cut off, it's like, where did it go? What happened? That's my value. Then they feel like they have no value.
Right.
And so, I mean, there's so much depth to these money stories.
Right, right, and that's a good point. When it comes to things like that, this is what we were talking about earlier about the balance, where it's just like now becomes like my worth is based upon like some monetary exchange.
Yes.
I don't know why I thought like of a prostitute, but
Yeah.
like you're
Well,
just you're placing a value based on, what if that becomes a belief? Like, my value is dependent upon how much you're giving it to me. Like, well, last year you gave me a car. How come this year I'm only getting, I don't know, a jacket or a leather, a designer bag? How
yeah,
come how come I want, so now it becomes that's the value placed, and or the belief becomes that that's what we're worth.
yeah,
And then there's a disconnect there, because what about the emotional attachment that is supposed to be there between a parent figure and a child? So now if there was no, if there's no intimacy, no hugging, no hand holding, or being comforted, and everything is just done through this transactional thing, I think there's so many other things. I mean, you could probably speak to that. What happens when that's so absent, and it's only the comforting or the coddling is only done through financial transaction
yeah.
exchange.
It really shuts down that internal gauge of being able to understand their own emotional values, their own emotions, but then they attach those emotions to the money. So that's the that's what was being set up in that example
Mm,
that I gave you, right? And
right.
so it's the value is what you're monetarily worth. And the message was, at least to my mom, your value is who you marry then, because she grew up in a
Right.
at a time where you know, women were married and they didn't have, as many options in regards to maybe their career paths, right? And yet, you know, she was married multiple times and yet it wasn't good enough for, maybe her father, where he said that person's not good enough. They're not wealthy enough. They're not this, not right. So it
Mm,
would impact her. And so, yeah, there was all these, you know, interesting dynamics that was exposed to. And so I had to really, again, look at and parse out, like, what are my values based on
right.
this, right? How do I feel? And one of the things we learn in psychology is you can have punishment and reward, right? But I never, from an Adlerian perspective, and I talked about Alfred Adler being, a psychologist, with Freud and blah, 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 and how he separated from Freud, but he believed in consequences to behavior. Whether that behavior is good or not, but those are consequences attached to that behavior. So it's not your value, it's not a punishment, it's not a reward, because the more we reward, the more expectation is built there. Like you said about the
Right.
handbag.
Right. The other thing too that you made me think about was growing up a certain way and seeing, let's say, for example, going back to the example of the, oh, I'm just giving you the money.
Mm-hmm.
So that person grows up
Yeah.
and then they find somebody that they think they want to marry, or they want to, they get married. So what do you think that expectation of that person's going to have on their partner?
Yes.
So there's that dynamic as well, where you grow up and so, I'll give you an example. Let's say somebody was so used to seeing mom balancing the checkbook,
Yeah.
and so mom was always in the kitchen table doing the checkbook, balancing it out, and then dad only just came in from work and he was bringing the money, but mom was the household manager.
Yeah.
So let's say this guy grows up. Now, those were his parents, and then he grows up. He finds a partner. They get married. If they don't talk about these money mindset issues and these beliefs and roles and whatnot, all of a sudden they can start getting into fights. And this is so commonplace. It's crazy. That's why I wrote the other book, which I don't really talk about. Do Before I Do. And it was about understanding, like, do you know the story of where your partner came from? Like, because if they haven't talked about it, and then it comes down to managing the finances in the household, he might have that expectation of his wife to do what he saw his mom do. Well,
Mm.
mom took care of that. I never had to take care of the managing of the finances, and she might be looking at you like, what are you talking about? Like, my dad did everything. My mom never did anything but the money. And now you have conflict because everybody's expecting somebody to do something they never grew up knowing how to do. And that's why there's so many fights around money. Or it could be the opposite,
Mm.
right? It could be they never talked about money for their kids. So now they're just kind of meandering and trying to figure it out, and there's no guidance, and everybody's just kind of making mistakes as they go because I grew up in a house, my parents never talked about it. I never saw them argue about it. I never saw them talk anything. I mean, that you're talking about growing up in a silo when it comes to money. And so it can go, so many different ways, where that household, that growing up, has such a profound effect on your money mindset and how you shape your current financial future and the decisions you make. And not talking about it with your partner, oh my goodness, I've seen so many cases where people are frustrated because the husband and the wife, they're not on the same page, or things like that, or they don't want to be open-minded to talking about it. It could be because their parents never talked about it. So I've been in just not, thank God, not too many, maybe two in the entire time when I was an advisor, where the husband just wasn't on board. Just but I have to say, side note, I had to wonder, and some of these people were older. I had to wonder if that had to do with me being an Asian woman that was younger. So
Mm.
I don't know. There was a bit of like ego I could feel, especially one of
Mm.
them. And I was just like, in my head, I was like, dude, and this was in my head. I did not say this, people.
Right.
In my
Right
head, I
into
was
our head.
like, yeah, the voice in my head was saying, like, dude, you are so screwed because you have an ego. You're screwed. And I
Yeah.
knew it. And it was like I was like, "Oh my god, you don't want to invest, you're cynical. You don't think you need insurance. And this guy was like a smoker, overweight.
Wow.
It was just a bad situation. I mean,
Whoa.
and it sucked because it was the wife was a friend of mine through a networking group back in the
Mhm.
day, and I mean, eventually she just couldn't handle it anymore in terms of like they were just not on the same page on a lot of things, and she eventually filed for a divorce. But I remember being in situations where there was somebody that had an ego, didn't want to listen. And it made me wonder, like, I mean, now I have more compassion in hindsight because I'm like, I don't know how they grew up. I don't know what's going on. I don't know what money stories and money, whatever demons they're dealing with. But the sad thing is, it has a profound effect on how they could move forward in creating wealth and creating abundance and getting on the same page as their spouse. And it's amazing how money has such an effect next to health on people's lives.
Absolutely. Uh, absolutely. I want to go back to something too
Yeah.
related to something you said about, what we learned growing up. And it's interesting because my mom had her own money story, right?
Mm,
About how she grew up and, her parents, um, giving her or transferring that emotional love and nurturing to money, that's your value, that's your worth, here's what you get, and so forth and so on. And yet with me, she was like, I don't want that for you. I
uh,
want something different. So
mm,
she took me to go get my first checking account. She taught me how to use a bank register. She taught me how to put a certain percentage, did I always listen? No, percentage of my paycheck back into the bank, right? But she taught me these things which were of such value early on. And
right.
so I still use a bank register today. Even though I manage my money online, I still use a bank register. And people are like, oh, yeah, sure. You still, yeah, I go to banks and ask her all the time. I am to the penny on everything just because I want to know where we stand
Right.
financially. Right. And so it's interesting how not only did she see what was happening, but still accept that, right? And still that was part of her value set because it was built from a very early age
Mm,
that she wanted to change that for me. And she said, I want
right.
you to have a different value about money, a different mindset about money. I want you to have different values placed on money, right? And I want you to be able to earn it and see the value that you place on money and develop your own understanding of it. So I think there's hope, right? Because
Right.
even at that time, I was like between 10 and 12 where she started talking about that. And I have to point out another instance where I was in the grocery store and I saw this mom with her young kids. They were about 8 or 9, and she's weighing out the produce and she's like, okay, so how much does this weigh, how much is this going to cost, and how much is this going to add to the bill, what do we have that, what's the total amount that we have to spend today, right? So I was like,
Oh, that's so cool.
dang, that's awesome, right? Not only they're doing math, but they're having an understanding of a budget and yada yada yada, right? So I was just like, that's cool, I love that. So there's so many
That's
different
a
ways
great
that we
point.
can you know teach our kids and the value that we want them to form around money or understanding around money. So,
Yeah, like, again, we were talking about the words that we're using around kids is so critical. Like, my child, thank God, is a saver, and he's got his investments and stuff. I mean, he's in
wow.
such a good position. He's doing better than some adults I know. A lot of adults I know,
Wow.
like, yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah, he has his own. Yeah, it was so funny because I got him because he finally turned 13, so now I could get him his own ATM and all that stuff, right? So there was a package the other day that came in. I was like, "What is this? I didn't order this," because I used to be the one ordering it, and so I found out. I said, "Hey, did you?" Well, it had to be him because his name was on the shipping label, and I was like, "You use your?" I go, "You used your ATM card?" He's like, "Your debit card?" He's like, "Yeah." I was like, "Yes, he knows how to do it now."
Wow.
So I
That's
was like, he did it on
awesome.
his own. Yeah, he did it on his own. So I was like, "Great, you don't gotta send me the links anymore."
Yay.
So he ordered, but here's the interesting thing. So I was having a conversation with him last night because he takes Krav Maga. Oh, yeah, the Krav Maga.
Uh-huh.
So and, they had offered a lifetime deal, right? It was like, if you paid
Oh.
in full, it was like 9,000, right? But this
Oh,
is
wow.
lifetime. This was a lifetime deal. So I said in the car last night, I said, "Hey, do you think that this is something you wanna stick with?" And he's like, "Yeah, why?" I said, "Because probably next year, I probably wanna get the lifetime thing." And I said, because if I'm paying, I'm paying like 1,500 a year, right? I said, if I'm
Right.
paying this every year, I go, if you multiply that times 12, I go, it's this much. But I go, if I do lifetime, I go, you just have to be in this for like 5 years to break it. I was breaking this all down.
Yeah.
And he was just like, no, no, no. That's like, I could tell like just by his voice, he was thinking it was too much.
Yeah.
So the thing that I have to work with my child is like, don't get caught up in, I don't want to hear the words, it's too expensive. And I'm not even the one that says it. I don't know if he gets it from the grandma. I don't know. And I'm just like, no. I said, do not, I don't want you to worry about that.
Yeah.
That can get taken care of easily. I said, I don't want you to think that you can't do it because you think something is expensive. So
Right.
I'm trying to get him out of that because I don't know, it's not coming from me. But I like the opposite where I want him to embrace like, hey, if it's something you want, it's something, it's of value, it's something you're gonna do. And I said, you can even if you just stayed in it for 5 years,
Yeah.
it's gonna pay off. We'll break more than even, but so I was like trying to teach him, we don't think that way.
Yeah.
There was always a possibility. I don't want him to start getting limited with this limited mindset of like, oh, I don't want to do, because this kid will do that because I think he gets kind of feels bad or guilty because he knows I'm doing it all on my own, and he doesn't want to be that burden. Even though he never asked me for things, he really doesn't, and he didn't even want a Christmas gift. He's like, no, I want.
Wow.
He's like, this child is, God bless him. Like every time I was like, what do you want for your birthday or Christmas? He's like, no, I'm okay. I have everything.
Well, and maybe too, that shows that, he's being insightful, that you are the one doing it by yourself, that, he is sensitive to that. I want to read a quick comment here
Oh
by
yeah,
Thinking
yeah.
360 Nat. She says, my parents were never on the same page when it came to money, and it made me discuss money with my husband. So she went the opposite direction, which
I
is
love
super
it.
cool, right? I love that. Sometimes
Yes.
like, again, I understand that with a dad who gambled and who excessively gambled. I didn't want to be that person, right?
Right.
Or if there was an addiction in my I'm like, I don't want that addiction, right? So it pushed me away from those kinds of things, right? So I,
Right.
I totally understand that. My question, and I know we're going to have to wrap this up pretty soon, but my question for you, Jen, is there are a lot of money coaches out there, some very popular ones, and they say that it should be one person in the family to take care of the money. What are your thoughts about that?
I don't fully agree with it, and I'll explain. So I think obviously if you're if you're in a long-term partnership or you're married, like you both need to be on the same page. And
Mhm.
so many times I've talked about what you would have are like money dates where it's either once a week, once a month, what you determine the frequency, but at some point on a routine basis, make sure it's consistent where you just get together and you have to talk about it. Now you can assign one person that's like the main manager.
Okay.
Let's just say you're the one person, like, one of you is going to probably be the person that's maybe you like doing it more or
That's
you're
me.
just more savvy at it. But
No.
it doesn't mean the other person was that.
I said, "That's me."
That's you. I know that's you. I know that's you. But it doesn't mean the other person does like, all right, well, you know what's going on. You take care of it. Like, I'm out of here. Like, no,
No.
you both need to know what the heck is going on. The money manager needs to be, yes, explain hey, this is what we're doing. Go over the debt, go over, the investments. What are some of the goals that you have for the quarter? I like quarter stuff. I mean, like I love planning things in quarterly chunks. So whatever it is, whatever works for you, break it up, but talk about this, and that way there's no surprises. Like, well, I didn't know you had to buy that, or I didn't know that was coming up. Like that's if you're on the same page and you're talking about these things frequently, and you're having open conversations about it, then you're going to reduce the amount of fights about money. There really shouldn't be any, because if you talk about it and if you both understand what's going on, then you'll be on the same page. Now this is where I would say set the tone. This is supposed to be a non-judgment zone. This is not supposed to be like we're accusing each other of things. Like you have to maintain that environment where like this is a safe zone and we're going to be respectful to each other. And there might be times when it gets tough. You might not agree on a certain purchase or an investment, but talk about it. And then if you need to bring in another expert or somebody, then do that. But One person, no. That's where we get problems because one person knows about it. And I have said this in workshops. I used to do workshops for people going through divorce. Woo,
Ooh.
that was a
Ooh.
tough. It was I left. I
So were you
stopped doing
like
that.
a mediator or just
I
a
wasn't a
list?
mediator, but it was like I had to listen to these challenges and when people were going through it. And I got to tell you, it gets
Woo.
ugly. It gets
Yeah.
ugly because for that very reason, let's say in this certain situation, this demographic happened to be older women, so like 50 and older.
Okay.
And
Ooh, I'm
what
there.
happened was many of them were in a situation where the husband took care of everything. They
Mm.
didn't know what was going on, they never talked about it, and then the whole, like, "Well, my husband took care of all of that." And I would stand up when it came to my segment because I did this workshop series with a mortgage broker because she was doing, like, mortgages for when you have to get rid of the house and then you have to
Oh,
find a new one or whatever, a real estate, a real estate agent, and then a divorce attorney and mediator. So the 4 of us put this workshop
oh,
together and,
nice.
yeah, and I had to tell the women, I said, "You need to know what's going on because one of 2 things are gonna happen. He's either gonna die or you're gonna get a divorce, and if you do not know what's going on, you are not gonna find out and not have the answer." And that happened. There was a friend of mine, her mom was going through a divorce, and it was a cheating situation. It was crazy, and she called me, and she's like, "Oh, I need help." I'm like, "Okay, what's the situation?" So she tells me, and she's like, "I don't know what we have." And I'm like, "Are you on the account?" She's like, "I don't know what I'm on." I said, "Okay, well, what do you know?" And I mean, I had to tell her friend her daughter who was my friend, I said, "There's nothing we can do. You don't know the accounts. If she's not on the accounts, it's not like we're gonna call up Fidelity and they're gonna tell us the
Right.
balance because you're not even a co-account, not a co-holder,
Yeah.
you're not on the account." And
The
so
co-owner. Yeah.
yeah, they're not gonna tell us anything. You don't have the right They don't have the right to tell
Oh
you
my
anything.
gosh.
And it was sad. I said, "You know what? You have to go through the
Mm.
attorney because then they're gonna order the quadro, and that's a whole, like, you have to disclose all this stuff." But that was a legal thing at first. That
Right?
had to go get handled legally before you can do anything with the money, but so that's an extreme case, but
Yeah.
that's what it could lead to. So if there's only one person knowing what's going on, why are you setting yourself up for disaster? Be on the same page. I mean, that's not we don't get married and go like, "Well, I hope this doesn't work." But, we want to make sure that we're in the loop because
Yeah.
God forbid, and even if let's say it's not a divorce situation, but there's death.
Yeah.
That's guaranteed.
Well,
One of
and
you
that's what I
Yeah,
was gonna say is it's not just a divorce, it's death, right? And if you can be stuck in a very difficult situation because the state, the jurisdiction are gonna have expectations of you, if there's certain things that are not signed off, if you're not a co-owner, if you don't have a living a will, if you don't like
trust, all
a
that.
trust, huge issues.
You're so
Huge issue.
screwed. I hate to say it,
Yeah.
you're screwed. So, if
Yeah.
you're married and you're listening, make sure you have a living trust. You
Yeah.
have to have a trust,
Yeah.
not just a will. The will can get
Yeah.
contested in court. That means all the people can come out of the woodwork and say, "Well, that money was mine, and that they said this was it."
I'm
A
taking
trust
notes. A
Yeah,
living trust.
a trust cannot be the trust will not be contested, so they have to
Mm,
honor that. So, please, I hear this is my thing when I hear people just say, like, "Well, just get a will," like, you can have that too, but don't just stop there. You
yeah,
want to have this thing where it won't get contested and somebody is gonna say, like, "Well, they promised me, their Roth IRA," or whatever the
yeah,
heck. You want those wishes, spelled out. I mean, down to, like, if I went into a coma, do I want you to give me morphine? Do I wanna be
yeah,
resuscitated? Do I want you to pull the plug? Like, you can't make those decisions. It's so difficult once that person's, like, incapacitated, and I can give you a list of stories of celebrities and people that didn't have the trust. There's fights over the estate. It's millions of dollars lost, all because of one document that was not put in place.
you
It's
know,
crazy.
I think we need to have a second part on this because money mastering, I mean, we haven't even gotten to like some of the stuff here, right? That we're going to talk about. But you just look at what's happening, and you're in the Southern California area. You just look at what's happening in Southern California right now with all these fires. If you don't have a living trust, if you don't have a will, I mean, there's people that have lost their everything. They didn't have insurance. I mean, where are you going with all of this, right? I
I
mean,
don't know.
is
Yeah.
heartbreaking. But let me tell you, a lot of these people don't have insurance either to rebuild. Then what?
Right.
Oh my
That
God. I
and
mean,
now I see that we're entering into this new phase of, like, now what?
now
Now
what?
that it's like now that, you know, everybody's pretty much like, left and fled the scene but
Yeah,
now it's like now we're faced with the aftermath. How are we rebuilding? And what if I wasn't a celebrity who had millions? Like, what if
yeah,
I was just a regular person? Now what do I do? I don't have
yeah,
insurance. They dropped me and everything burned. Now what? And here was the crazy thing too, Summer, that I was reading like 2 days ago. The real estate market is going nuts. There's a lack of supply.
yeah,
People,
absolutely.
the landlords are getting
Yeah,
crazy. Like some people are, and this is the part I was like, man, what are regular people gonna do? There are people who are putting like, I'll give you 20,000, this is for renting,
yeah,
20,000 down, and I will pay 15,000 a month, and then
yeah.
another offer, well, I'll give you 23,000, and I'm like, well, what about the have-nots?
Exactly. And here's the thing, right now, over 2,000 people, 2,000 families lost their houses, right, in Southern California. Now we're looking at that issue where people are doing these bidding wars just for rentals, right? And so it's like, or I came from a place called Santa Cruz, California, and honestly, the rents there are already outrageous. The mortgages are incredibly high, and now they're building these crazy like 4-story built 5-story buildings that they're charging for a one bedroom $3,300 to
Right.
rent a one bedroom, right?
And that's
And
normal
so
here in California.
yeah, I
North
mean,
and South, it's normal. Like, I was
yeah,
looking at a two-bedroom, like, last year, I was like, "Dang," it's like at a two-bedroom down the
yeah.
street. I was looking and I was like, "This thing is like 4,400."
Yeah, exactly, two
Two-bedroom.
bedroom, and even when back in the, late '80s, early '90s, I was renting something in the Bay Area when I went to Berkeley, and that thing was, I think, 2,800 for the both of us, and we both paid $1,400. That was back then, right?
Girl, you know what my rent for this room was? Like, when I was at UC Riverside? $250.
Oh my God. Yeah, no, 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 no. I had to pay when
Like
I lived in my
20,
sorority, I even
20,
paid to
30
park my
years ago.
car every month, like $300 behind the sorority. Like, but I worked for that. Like,
Right.
my parents were certainly going to pay for it. So they were like, whatever. They didn't even know. And I was like, well, if I have a car, I need to pay for parking $300. $250 for rent. It was $300 for me to park my car, right? The back of I
Yeah.
think it was
We were in
actually like
Berkeley.
per quarter of my
I was in, like, the butt of the Inland Empire, girl, that's why it was cheap.
you know what? I went looking for a house last year in Sacramento, in Roseville, above Sacramento, right? And still, here's the thing about the insurance. I specifically called, my insurance company and said, "Hey, will you cover me? Because is this in a fire zone?" Like I was thinking about these things before I ever looked for a
Right,
place in a particular area because I was like, I have to have insurance. If something happens, this house has to be covered. And I
right.
otherwise I was like, no, the investment is I'm not going to place an investment in that area. So it's just, a lot of these people who were stuck in LA, unfortunately, these were old family homes. Some people, yeah, had the money to purchase there, in later years, but still in all, my heart breaks because
Oh, yeah.
family records, history has been built in those homes, and that
Oh, I
is just
know.
devastating. It doesn't matter if it's an old family home or if you have money, it doesn't matter. It's like these
Yeah.
people are still they have a huge loss to bear,
Oh my
right?
gosh,
In
it's
so many different ways.
heartbreaking.
Yeah,
It's so heartbreaking,
yeah,
and it teaches us a lesson, to have your affairs in order.
absolutely.
Have a plan and have this in place, and unfortunately, it's and this goes in so many different places, like, I've had clients who they were interested in the trust as well as insurance because they went through it with their parent that didn't have those things in place. And
Yes.
I'm like, "Why do we wait for it to get to that point? Why?
Yeah.
Why?" Like,
And
it's like it's unfortunate that it's the people either you're privy to it and you understand it's important, or you went through the devastation of it and you're like, "I don't wanna go through that. I don't want my" this is what they tell me, "I don't want my kids to go through what I had to go through with my parents because they didn't have anything in place."
Absolutely, absolutely. And here's the thing. I took care of my grandmother's trust when she passed on, right? They had everything in order, and yet it was still, thank God they had attorneys, they had the and I dealt with all of that, but we still had people that were disgruntled in, with the truck. And it's like, but, and we had to go through some stuff. And yet it was, thank God. I always said thank God my grandparents had their affairs in order. Thank
Right.
God.
It's like,
Thank
no,
God.
this is what it says we're doing with this.
Yeah, it's
There's no arguing
absolutely.
with it.
But they were able to take certain things to court. So because they still wanted something, right? So it's like
Oh
you
gosh.
can still incur those situations even when things are spelled out, right? So my question for you, Jen, is what is your nugget?
Oh, my nugget. You know what? We didn't talk about this, but I'll go back to the money mindset. I know we went all over the place. It was
I
great. It
know
was
it was
great. It
good
was
though.
great. It was
Yeah.
good. My nugget is like if you um take some time to think about a block, meaning if you feel that you're having a weird feeling towards money, like you don't feel good about it, or you're feeling, whenever you think about your financial situation and it doesn't feel good, or when you're buying something, or when you're thinking about like, I don't know if I deserve this, I shouldn't do it. I want you to think back if there is some guilt and shame from your childhood.
Mm.
I think that's really important because this is a block that you need to release. And maybe we'll talk about this in a future episode. But think about a root cause. If you can think about something that happened in your childhood, did you have a parent that yelled at you for asking for something? Did
Oh,
somebody on the playground, yell at you and say like, "You're not pretty enough. Why do you think that you can have that?" Whatever it may be,
yeah.
whatever it may be, and identify that block, because when you can identify that and have awareness, you can start to release that through different tools and forgiveness, and then that way you can move forward and build a more positive relationship with money. But I promise you, if you sit there and do this, you'll be able to identify that there was a root cause that happened in your childhood that either caused fear, guilt, or shame. And this is why there's some of this weird feelings, and it doesn't feel good when you think about money.
Oh yeah, what a great nugget. I just
Thank
love it.
you.
All
How
right,
about
where's the
you?
sage? I need to clear my space.
I know. I burn everything.
My
Burn everything.
nugget? Okay, I've got a little to do for the folks out there that are listening or those that are going to watch the replay. And you can watch the replay on YouTube. You can watch it just by pressing the link when we post on Instagram. So here's the thing. I want you to get out a piece of paper when you're ready, and I want you to list your values and beliefs around money.
Mm.
And the next thing I want you to list is why you feel this way, or why or how those values and beliefs developed. The next thing I want you to do is I want you to challenge those values and beliefs, or ask yourself, do I still align with those values and beliefs? And then I want you to list three things that are actually your values and beliefs, not the ones that were imposed on you or the conditioning, but what aligns with you now regarding your money and your money mindset. So just list those three things. So that's kind of a little formula to help. And it's just a one pager. You don't have to have a whole journal. You can have a piece of paper, but it's a way of looking and reflecting on your money mindset. And I think that in itself is going to be really helpful to understand how those values and beliefs were formed. And do you still align with those values and beliefs? Because they can run deep, and it's something to think about when you have it down on paper. From mind to paper, it's just a different situation altogether. I know Jen's a journaler, and I know that she learns a lot just by doing that every day. So with that said, thanks, Jen, for going over.
Thank
Oh, mention your
you.
book and where they can find your book and the
Oh,
name
yeah,
and
yeah,
all
yeah.
that.
You can go to Amazon and then is it backwards? Okay, well,
Yeah,
it's
but
the
that's okay.
creative code. It looks like this. You can't miss the cover. It looks like that. Um, so yeah, it's called the creative code, a creative professional's way to happiness, wealth, and joy. You'll still get value out of it if you think you're not a creative, even though I think everybody is. And just it's really broken down to simple actionable tools that you can use to change your mindset when it comes to money. So yeah, check it out on Amazon. There's a bazillion reviews, so except for that one that gave me a 1 star.
Hey, 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 you know what? We're all gonna get them. We're all gonna get it. It's
I
okay.
was like,
No tat from that.
I saw that a couple like 2 months ago, and I was laughing, and I was like, because I'm like, all the other reviews are 4 or 5 stars, but this one person, I think it's a lady,
Was it
like,
even verified that she purchased the book?
no, but I was laughing, thinking like, damn, who hurt you?
Who hurt you?
Like,
I
okay.
love it.
But
Just
I mean, I
laugh.
wasn't mad about it. I wasn't mad about it. I was just like, okay, you're like the only person that really didn't like it, but that's okay. To each his
I
own.
love the reframe on that. Who hurt you?
Because I was reading it and I was like, because she said, or whoever, I don't know if it was a guy. It sounds like it's a woman, but the person said this book was all over the place, and I was like, it was. And I was like,
It
I
was.
thought I had a really good chapter outline. So that's why I was kind of laughing about the whole thing. I was like, all right, whatever.
Well,
I'm
this
not
was
mad. I was just
awesome.
like, even Paul's like, well, how do you feel about that? I'm like, whatever. I was like,
This is
I go, the review doesn't
so
even make any
hard.
sense to me.
Oh my God. All right, my friend. Thank you, everybody out there, for watching and hanging in there with us today. We had such a great discussion. This was so much fun. Thank you, Jen, for your insight, your wisdom, and your expertise.
Thank
You've been in
you.
the money field forever, for a long time.
I
And
know.
so just to have your knowledge, wisdom, expertise infused into this episode, it's been amazing. So thanks so much. And thank you all for being out there. We're going to do what we do best. We're going to dance this out. And please join us next week for another show of the Emotional Entrepreneur live show. All right. Thanks, everyone. Let's
Thank you.
dance.
And thank you for sharing your stories.
You're welcome. Those crazy stories. Bye, everyone. Have a great week. All right. Take care, everyone. See you next